Hello, this is Riley Smith with Make Good Creative Network. I am back today with a long-awaited promise of a video about how to end a comedy sketch. Once you've written the sketch, you've got your character, you've got your game, things have escalated. If you're wondering how to even begin writing a sketch, I have a video for that where I break down the whole structure beginning to end of how to write a comedy sketch. But let's say you've gone all the way through it and now you're just wondering how to end it, or you're wondering what is the best, most satisfying way to end a sketch. Endings are super important because most often the way that your audience feels with the last line, the very end when the lights go out with your sketch, is how they are going to feel about your whole sketch. It's how the human brain works. We're going to remember the last thing most clearly. So how do we make sure that our audience walks away from the sketch feeling good, feeling as if they enjoyed it? There are 3 simple ways that you can wrap up any sketch that you write. These all work well with audiences. I've also added a bonus way to end sketches. And at the end, I'll talk a little bit about what you can always do to end a sketch if you just can't find the right button. Why am I saying the word button? I'm going to help you sound like a professional sketch comedy writer here. Sketch comedy writers call the end of your sketch the button. This is because it buttons up the sketch. It ties everything together. It makes everybody feel like things are neat and tidy and closed and done. It provides closure. It closes. Thus the button. Have I explained the metaphor enough? So we're going to find out what are the simplest ways to button your sketch. So let's talk about the 3 simplest ways to end a sketch. And then I'll give you a little bonus one at the end, just for funsies. It's one of my favorites. The first way, and the way that is most satisfying without a doubt to audiences, is reincorporation. This means simply taking something from previously in the sketch and referencing it again. This gives us the feeling that the sketch has come full circle. I'm putting full circle in air quotes because this doesn't even have to be complicated. With a sketch, you actually don't have to pull together everything that you've said and wrap it up in a neat little box like you might have to do in a fully scripted play or a long-form improv scene. With a sketch, in order to give us that full circle feeling, you just literally have to mention something again that was mentioned previously. So if the sketch previously had someone mention that they were dating Superman, then at the end of the sketch, you could have Superman come rescue everybody. And that would be your button. The sketch doesn't even have to primarily be about that person dating Superman. It could have been just something they mentioned. But the satisfaction of a detail coming back into play is so good to the human brain that it can be that simple. So for reincorporation, you just take something from earlier in your sketch and you mention it again. There's a really great example from Whitest Kids You Know, WKUK. This sketch is called Sniper Business. It opens with a young man walking into his boss's office saying, "Hey, I have a question for you, boss." But then the bulk of the action of the sketch is this boss actively trying to kill somebody else across the street who is also trying to bomb him. That is the bulk of the action, where he's like, "It's just business," and it's equating this murderous business mindset to war. It's great. But we're focused on the closing, the reincorporation, which is the button. So at the very end of the sketch, the boss remembers that the guy came in here for something, and he asks him, "What was it you wanted to ask me?" And the young man who came in says, "Can I have some time off for a wedding?" And the boss goes, "No." It's hilarious. It's a great ending. It gives you a sense of closure because the guy came in here for something. So there's a sense of satisfaction when we bring back that detail, when we remember that detail. And now his original goal has been satisfied, which is a reincorporation of the very first line in the sketch and brings us that lovely full circle feeling. I highly recommend that you go watch that sketch. It's a great example. Button type number 2, the switch. The switcheroo if you're feeling silly. The switch is the moment that a character's personality or mindset or particular opinion changes. They switch. This should be a very large change, or it's not super noticeable, but it should be some kind of switch in status, in circumstances. Something has changed drastically for this character. For example, if you had a sketch where Tammy is trying desperately to get her boyfriend Mark to propose, maybe the action unfolds so that by the end, he is finally proposing to her. And she rejects him. Good for her. But that would be a switch. Mark goes from commitment phobic to being the one popping the question. Tammy goes from desperately wanting to get engaged to not wanting him at all. This is the big switch in that case. It's fairly easy to think of switches. Basically, whatever your character wants or their biggest personality trait that is the game of the scene, you just flip that on its head. So maybe you have a sketch about a very concerned, overbearing mom who's always on everybody's ass about safety. And then by the end of the sketch, she says, F this, I'm joining a biker gang. That's a big switch. Another example, maybe you have an uptight, hard-ass boss who's always on everybody's case. And by the end of the sketch, he gives everyone 200% Christmas bonuses. Big switch. Or maybe you have a sketch about a snobbish, elite chef, and at the end of the sketch they try a can of spaghetti and they love it. They think it's great. The correct switch for your sketch will be inherent in the scene. So look for whatever is the primary source of conflict, or more particularly, what is it about your character that is causing the conflict, and how can you make that flip? An example of the switch button that you can go watch on the YouTubes is, again, WKUK's poop sketch. I think it's either poop sketch or Timmy's poop sketch. It's gross, but I think it's kind of a brilliant sketch, especially in terms of the structure. It's a great example of sketch structure and how to do it well. I actually do an entire breakdown of the whole sketch from platform / beginning to the button in my other video about the anatomy of a sketch. What are the different parts of a sketch? How do you escalate, etc. So if you want a full breakdown of the Timmy's poop sketch, I have that. You're welcome. But we're talking about buttons right now. So how does that sketch use the switch button? The main conflict of this sketch is that Timmy has, in the middle of a business meeting, pulled just a handful of poop out of his pants, and he's holding it in the meeting. The only reason that this is really a conflict, though, is because the boss is upset that there's been so many interruptions and he won't let Timmy leave to handle said poop. So everyone is stuck in the room because the boss is refusing to let them leave. So he is actually the main source of the conflict there. He won't let anyone leave. Everybody has to stay in the meeting. The switch happens after everything has escalated so much that even the boss yells, "Go to the bathroom." So there's a switch from the boss not letting anyone leave to explicitly ordering Timmy to go to the bathroom. That is the switch button to end that sketch. The third way to end a sketch is what I call the confirmation button. So this is when you just confirm that you have passed the point of no return. You shouldn't even be thinking about ending your sketch until you have escalated the game or your original idea past the point of no return. There is no way to get back to the world before the sketch started. You can just restate, reaffirm the action of the sketch and that there's no going back. This can be a trickier one because sometimes it feels a little anticlimactic, because that's not necessarily like a joke, but it can feel very funny to have a character point out what has happened and how there is no going back. So try it on, see if it works for your sketch. I've got another WKUK example for this one, a really famous one of their sketches, the Lincoln sketch. They use the confirmation button in this. The game of the sketch is that it's how Abraham Lincoln, quote unquote, really died. All right. So it's a great sketch. Go watch it if you haven't. But that is, like, without too many spoilers, that is the game of the sketch. So the way that they actually button it, the way that they end it, is one of the characters literally says, "And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what really happened. That is how Abraham Lincoln really died." And they say it in a very silly way, which makes it better. But that's literally how the sketch ends. He just says what happened in the sketch. So that is always an option. You can just have a character plainly state what occurred in the sketch and how there's no going back to the status quo. Abraham Lincoln's dead now, and you know the truth. It's a great sketch. Very irreverent. Very silly and great. That sketch is also incidentally pretty much an example of the bonus button I want to share with you, which is one of my favorite buttons. This is kind of a subcategory almost of, like, confirm there's no going back. This button is kill someone. In your sketch, of course. Fictionally. Only fictionally. You can really drive home the point to your audience that there is no going back and there's nowhere else to go from here by killing somebody in your sketch. Monty Python does this. Somebody will just haul off and shoot somebody else. The Muppets do this almost exclusively. They actually had a thing that they would say in their writer's room, which is, if you don't know how to end it, blow something up or have somebody eat somebody else. So killing a character in your sketch is a really firm way to be like, okay, sketch is done now. We've reached the ultimate button. Death. Like I said, it's one of my favorite things to do, but I've found that it really works well if you're very silly, cartoonish, and absurd. So this works great with puppets because they're automatically silly. They're automatically absurd. It works great for Monty Python because they're very much absurdism. They're surreal at times. So you can just have someone pull out a gun and shoot somebody else, and it doesn't feel that off. If your style is a little more realistic, this may not work as well. But if you tend towards the really out there, the really absurd, the cartoonish or surreal, this is a great option for you. A great example of the bonus button and another sketch that I break down in my other video about sketch structure is Monty Python's The Cheese Shop. I love this sketch. It's so fucking good. It's the whole gimmick. I'll go watch it. Go watch it if you haven't seen it. But it does end with one of the guys finally just shooting the other guy. It's a great example of this this particular button. What I did want to point out is that even with all of these ways to button and all these things that you can do, often it works for the sketch to just end it after your funniest escalation, the funniest line. When things have reached that peak, the sketch has climaxed, everything is done, there's no returning to the status quo, you can just cut there. This works especially well with shorter sketches. There's something called a blackout sketch that's literally lights up, a line, there's your punchline, lights out. You can write a sketch that's literally 2 or 3 lines. You don't want your button to be longer than the rest of the sketch. So if you're really struggling to find a button for your sketch, it's totally okay to just end it at that last, funniest, climactic point. So now that you know how to end a comedy sketch, I suppose the next question is, how do you know which one is the best for your sketch? You don't know until you try. I would suggest that as a way to get better and better and better at sketches, you take your sketches and you actually try on all 3 of these, all the different options that I've laid out for you. Write a button of every kind and then present that to a writing group or other comedians you know. Comedy definitely works best in teams and in situations where you're able to get feedback while you're working on the sketch. If you're in a troupe or something, that's great. Have your troupe look at all these different ways that you could possibly end this sketch and ask for their opinion. If you're not in a troupe, talk to other comedians online. Ask your friends who would probably go to a show. You can ask a normie. That's okay. See which ending they think is funniest. Try out all the different endings on your sketches, and then you'll get better at kind of intuitively figuring out what will be more satisfying or just what you like better. The other way to get better at endings that I really, really recommend, watch a ton of sketches and pick out the button. Pick out which kind of button they did. Like I told you earlier, these examples. You can see how and when they work. Watch a ton of sketch comedy from different troupes and then analyze the sketch. Okay, what was their platform? What was the shift? And definitely, how did they end it? What kind of button did they do? Does it not fit in any of the categories that I used here? Maybe. That's cool. Creativity is awesome. Figure out, okay, what is that button then? How did that work? Or how did it not work if you don't think the ending is funny? When you see an ending that you don't think is good, what is it about that makes it unsatisfying? That can often be even more helpful than figuring out what does work. The other thing that I will say about sketches before we wrap up today's video is that endings are something a lot of sketch writers struggle with. But often it's because we're trying to complicate things for ourselves. We're trying to come up with something really interesting or creative or say something, or you're like, I have to think of something that's so funny and random and out of left field that it's really going to surprise people. You don't want to do any of that. You don't worry about being so funny. Don't worry about being so creative. The sketch you already have, what you have already written, has your ending in it already. There's this great quote from the play Endgame by Samuel Beckett, and it's, "The end is in the beginning." And that's how storytelling works for humans. The right ending for your sketch is already in the sketch that you have written. It's there, you just have to find it. And it's not even that there's only one right answer. There's probably a ton of right answers that are already implied by your sketch. And you just have to pick one. You just have to pick what the sketch is already telling you. The end is in the beginning. If this collection of circumstances happened, then what? Don't badger your brains trying to come up with something creative out of left field. See what the sketch has already said, and that will find your most satisfying ending. Those are my tips on how to end a comedy sketch. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was super helpful. I firmly believe that comedy is a skill. It can be taught and improved. And I think when comedians say that it is some innate talent, they are just trying to secure job security. So I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope you go out and look at a bunch of examples. I hope that you write your own sketches and try out a bunch of different buttons. I also hope that you like the video and subscribe to the channel. I do a lot of comedy advice. I have been doing comedy. I always have to do the math on my age here whenever I do this. I've been doing comedy for 16 years now. I have done comedy in California, in Texas, in the UK. I have done stand-up, improv, and sketch comedy, and I've done just acting as well. I like to bring all those things that I have learned out here on the YouTubes, and I hope that you find them very helpful. Make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to share comedy tips or just general creative advice every single month. So make sure you hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you next time. Most importantly, let's go make them laugh.